Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We have another behind the scenes episode of Novelists Unwind to bring to you today. These are three, including me, four of the authors of the Erie Canal Brides collection. Yay, look at that beautiful book. And they have joined me to talk about their individual stories. There are seven novellas in this collection, all about the Erie Canal and the Ohio Erie Canal. And we're just all excited to share with you some of the inspiration behind how those stories came about. So my guests today are Lauralee Bliss, Sherri. Yes, hi, Sherri Wilson Johnson.
Hi there.
And Rose McCauley. And Rose was the mastermind behind this idea and brought us together to write these stories for Barbara. And we really appreciate her doing that.
I couldn't have done it without you all.
No, we're real excited. So anyway, we're going to start with Lauralee. Her story is the first one in the book because it actually takes place first as far as a timeline would go. And so it just seems fitting that we have her start off telling us about the Erie Canal, where her story takes place, and a little bit about it. Lauralee?
Hi, it's really great to be here. So my heart is in the Erie Canal because that's where my husband's family comes from, in Scotia, New York, right near the Erie Canal. So I got to see a lot of the signs for it, and the old Erie Canal unfortunately flooded into his aunt's property during one hurricane. So, and then just down the road from my in-laws' house is a big boulder that they use to take all the boulders to help build the Erie Canal. One fell off a wagon, and now it's there as kind of this landmark. So I feel like the Erie Canal is just kind of part of me. I've been with my husband almost 30 years now, so kind of neat. But anyway, so I was so happy to be a part of this collection. And so I decided to set my book, actually, or novella, I should say, in a little quaint village called Little Falls. And Little Falls is like along the Mohawk River. And if you've ever gone along any of the Mohawk River area in the Mohawk Valley of New York, it's really a beautiful little town. And just going there to do some research for this wonderful novella, I could see why this would be an interesting setting for my book, because the river there literally has falls or rapids all throughout. There are large rocks and boulders and everything, making it a hazard for boaters. So you can see that, of course, why the Erie Canal would have been put there. So between that and then just seeing these quaint farms, suddenly I realized this would be a great setting, because I'm big on settings, for the novella, and then taking it from there, where we have the hero, David Marshall, cheesemaker. Actually, cheesemaking started to become a really big industry there in that region. So I thought, hey, make him a cheesemaker. And raising his two sons, had lost his wife in childbearing, so raising his two sons, and suddenly come into a confrontation with the heroine, Melanie O'Neill, whose father is looking to buy up parcels of land to construct the Erie Canal. So we have David, who is not really sure he wants to part with his land, and Melanie, who knows her father must have this land to fulfill his obligation with the committee. So here we have this kind of thing going on here between the two of them. And so don't want to give too much away, but let's just say that children can really become their apple of God's eye, and they can absolutely fulfill so many wonderful things. And so his children absolutely come in and do some miraculous things with the two of these interesting characters, so Melanie and David. So really glad to brought that together and bring that together in my novella.
That's really cool. And Lauralee's story takes place in 1817 up in New York. And then Sherri's is the last story in the book, right?
Right.
It takes place in 1859. So this collection covers 42 years of time on these canals. Now, Sherri's also takes place in New York. Do you guys know how far apart Little Falls is from Albion, New York?
No, I did not even think about that, but we could actually Google it.
I know mine is about 30-40 miles east of Utica, New York. So
okay,
on that side of the state, and I'd have to look up the other?
We are, if you were to, of course, back in the day, they may have walked. And if they
Sure.
walked, it would have been 183 miles and 60 hours. So now it is about 3 hours away. So.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, that's really cool. And I think, just before Sherri starts telling us about her story, I think it's just so important to realize, and I didn't know. I mean, Rose asked me if I wanted to write a story about the Erie Canal, and of course I said yes, because I wanted to be in a novella collection.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, the Erie Canal. Okay, but the history is very fascinating, and actually the canal was so important to opening up just a lot of the areas west of New York, and even actually made New York City part of what it is today, because of being able to transport goods and services and people to these far off places. So, okay, Sherri, enough of that. Tell us about your story.
Well, and again, thank you to Rose for inviting me in, and thank you to whichever author it was that had to step out of it, because that's how I got put in there. So that was a wonderful thing. And it's funny because I primarily write Southern stories, or at least set in Georgia or Florida. I am a Georgia girl, and so for a long time I was like, I just want to be a Georgia writer. That's what I want to be known as. And then Rose surprised me, with this, and I thought, I don't know anything about New York. I don't know anything about the Erie Canal. Oh my goodness! And the earliest I had written was like 1890 something, I think, or 1880 something. So this was a huge stretch for me. And even this was my first novella. So huge stretch. But I loved it. I loved the whole process. And my heroine in the story, and it's called A Bridge Between Us, her name is Susanna Higley. And in all of my research, I could not decide what I wanted to write on. And one of my dear friends started researching for me, and she said, oh, well, there was a bridge that collapsed in Albion, New York in 1859. And I said, Albany? And she said, no, Albion. I was like, I have no idea what that is, So I Googled it and looked at, and sure enough, and I'm like, that's my story right there. That's my story, So the opening scene is, it's the day of the state fair, and Susanna makes wax flowers. And so she has entered her wax flowers in the state fair competition to see if she wins a ribbon and prize money. And so she is standing on the bridge with 100 or so more people, and they're waiting for a tightrope walker to cross the Erie Canal. True story. And then the bridge collapses. So that's my first scene. And then of course, the man who rescues her from the waters, it's like, who is this stranger? And as we get further into the story, we realize he's not so much a stranger, But what was really exciting to me about writing this was the fact that the Erie Canal did go all the way to Albany and then down the Hudson River and to New York, because she wanted to get her wax flowers into the merchants' stores in New York. And so I have not traveled much in my life, and so kind of I put that into her character, of that desire to get out of Albion, and just even to go up and down the canal. Dad, just let me go up and down the canal one time, and so John Hawkins is the hero in this, and his family was kicked out of town because of a feud, and so he has returned to try to resolve that family feud. And so he ends up, her father has some business. He's a sawmill owner and he has business issues. John wants to help. The father's like, no, we're not supposed to associate with you, So the whole thing, and actually one of the ladies from ACFW that interviewed me, she called this a love triangle. She said, I've never seen a love triangle like this before. I said, love triangle? And she said, yes, between Susanna and her father and John, because she feels like she has to decide between them, and because at first I was like, oh, I didn't write a love triangle. I don't think Barbara would have liked that very much, can't have two heroes in there. But anyway, so, it's just their journey of reconciling, forgiving, how they can move on, and then a little bit of romance in there too, on the Erie Canal. So,
cool.
Yeah, and so I'm super excited. I've been talking to the historian there, and I'm trying to get, if he can work it out, to get a newspaper article about the book, like an interview. That would be really cool. So
that would be really cool.
Yeah. So we'll see, but yeah, it was just a fun story to write, and I didn't even know that wax flowers existed back then. So
no, well, I've learned two things already as we're recording that. I didn't know about the cheese industry just starting out in 1817 or 1819. What was it? 1817, and then about the wax flowers too.
And it turns out that Queen Victoria, it was so in love with wax flowers that she had about 15,000 of them created for her wedding to Prince Albert.
Oh my God.
And so the Victorian ladies in their little, parlors were working on them all the time, just, because it was a popular thing. So,
so cool. That's so fun. And it's fun when you take, like you said, this bridge really did collapse, and you really use that as a starting point for your story. So
yes.
So everybody, again, I'm going to show the book because it's a beautiful book, and rooted in history.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, Rose. Rose has been my guest before on Novelists Unwind. So you can also listen to her. We talk longer about not only the Erie Canal Brides collection, but also another collection that she and I were in together, the Courageous Brides collection. And Lauralee was in it too, so that's pretty cool. Okay, we're now going, we start out in New York and cross across the Lake Erie, and then the Ohio Erie Canal goes south down to the Ohio River. And Rose's story takes place in a little town called Zoar, Ohio in 1858. So tell us real quick about your story, Rose.
Well, I live about 50 miles south of the Ohio River. So my husband and I were able to drive up into Ohio and go to that little town of Zoar, which is still there, and met a lot of really nice people there this summer to help me with the research on the book. My story, and the main thing about Zoar, and I'd heard of Zoar in the Bible, but not Zoar, Ohio, until I did this research for this book, is that the people that lived there were called Zoarites or separatists, and they were separated from the Lutheran Church in Germany, and that's why they were persecuted in Germany, and that's why they came over here to build a new community. Well, when they did that, the Quakers even helped them with their passageway over here, and they helped them with the funds to start the town there and build the buildings that they had. Well, and then they wanted to pay the Quakers off and get that note off of their head, and so they decided when the canal came through their town that they would build part of the canal. They built 2 locks, I think, and 7 miles of the actual canal. Now, it sounds like a good deal, but there were more women in this group than there were men. There were only 196, I think, people that came over from Germany to do this. So it's a very small group and less men than women. And so they were kind of like the Shakers here in Kentucky. I don't know if you're all familiar with them, but they put them in different dormitories, and they did not live together as husband and wife for those 7 years that they were digging the canal, because they made the women help as much as the men. And there were pictures of women with some had wheelbarrows, some just had things they could hold, their aprons in their hands, and that's how they dug it by hand and then put it in their aprons and carried it and dumped it. I mean, it was very hard physical labor. And if they had any children at that time, they stayed in a children's home until later when they got through building the canal. So that was very interesting. I felt very sorry for the ladies, but they were a very hardworking society, and like I said, they were very kind. And the people that live there now, some of them are their ancestors helped found the town of Zoar, and so they were very helpful to me too in my in my history, in my research for the history of that. But my heroine is Amanda, and my story starts in 1856. So Amanda did not help build the canal. Her mother did, and her father. But Amanda didn't do it. She wasn't even born until after that, when the couples got back together. Amanda is a separatist, but her love interest in the book his name is Daniel Jeremiah, and he drives one of the riverboats that go through that area. Now some of the Zor people were even riverboat captains, and they took their goods to other places. But they also had him stop there sometimes, and so that's how she met him. And they kind of liked each other the first time they met. Then the second time they meet, he goes to the doctor there in the town to get a tooth pulled because he's got a bad toothache. And after that, they kind of keep together in contact, and then they finally decide that they want to leave Zor because he would have to give all of his belongings to the society. It was a commune, really, and he would have to give up all his worldly goods to the society if he wanted to marry her. And so she decided she would leave and they would go somewhere else. So that was kind of the big conflict in my story. And it was a hard decision for both of them, but it was just an interesting place. I wouldn't have wanted to be there when they were digging the canal myself.
Me either. Yeah, that's interesting. That's great tension too. So there you got it. Those are the three of the stories in the Erie Canal Brides collection, and it really is fascinating, the history. I mean, I'm just gonna do mine really quick. Rooted also in history, what they called, I've got a note, Fugitive Slave Law Act was passed in about 1850, and my story takes place in 1852. So what this law did, they also called it the Bloodhound Law, where before, if a runaway slave got on the other side of the Ohio River, they did have some rights. But after the passage of this law, if you were found helping a runaway slave, you could be charged with actual treason and fined and arrested and spend time in jail. And it just didn't matter where your heart was. I mean, the penalties got very severe. So I kind of worked that into my story, which also takes place in Ohio because I grew up there, and centers around a couple of towns that were important to my childhood that there aren't towns I lived in. I had relatives that lived in them. So anyway, it's real fascinating to see some of the true things that happened and how I could also weave those into my story. So once again, Erie Canal, there we go. Beautiful, beautiful book, 7 wonderful stories, lots of history, and it really is just a fascinating tale. I want to ask each of you again before we close. We've got 2 questions to ask you, so I'm going to do one round and then we'll do the last round. Starting with Lauralee, Sherri, and then Rose. What's next for you guys? What are you working on now that this book has come out and it's in people's hands? Lauralee, what are you working on?
I'm working on another novella, actually. Rue Barber, The Hometown Heroines, will be coming out sometime next year, but World War II, and mine will be having to do with the Victory Gardens, so during that time. So I'm researching that. Also have a proposal out now on the forming of Shenandoah National Park and the giving up of the land with the mountaineers that used to live in that area. So that's near and dear to my heart because I don't live too far from the park. And so we'll see what happens. And I still hike. I do a lot of hiking. So I have books coming out on hiking. So it's fun.
That's cool. Yeah. Sherri, what's up with you?
Well, I have 3 proposals in for historical novellas. One is a gold mining story that is set in North Georgia, which is where my ancestors were. One is one set in New York, in Washington Square, and in the early or late 1800s. And then another one is set in Fort Morgan, Alabama, on Mobile Bay. So we'll see if those stories end up getting written. But the one that I'm actually writing right now is a contemporary suspense, and it is set in Kansas because I had a tornado in it, but now I'm not having a tornado in it. So I may change the setting to Georgia. I'm not really sure what I'll do on that yet. We'll just see how it goes because I took the tornado out. So, you know. And it's a story about a lady who has inherited her great-great-grandfather's historic home. She wants to put her business in there and live there. However, developers have come through and they're trying to tear it down. And so she's got some threats and things like that going, and nobody knows who the threats are coming from. So, and I'm not even sure yet. There's enough villains in there that we have to see how that one turns out. So
that's the fun thing about suspense is, when the author doesn't even quite know, it's going to be suspenseful.
Exactly.
That's cool. Rose, what are you up to?
Well, I do have something to tell you. This last time she asked me that question, I said, I'm just marketing this book for right now. But I have started. I met with a girl yesterday, in fact, and we're trying to come up with some novella ideas that we can be in together. This girl has never been published before, and I would love for her to get. She's a wonderful writer. She's just an instinctive writer, I think.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we were in a writing group together, so I've heard her read a lot of her things, and I want her to get a chance to do that. And I wanted to tell, just when I saw you raise up the book, I have written on this one of these canal boats up in Ohio, just not too far from where our story is set, my story in Zor, which is very close to Barber Publishing, is why Becky wanted us to put this town in there. And it's just such, if you ever have a chance, it's near Roseville, I think, Roseville Village. And my friend and I went up to the Amish country, and we had a chance to ride on this boat. And it's just like one of the most peaceful rides you can get, because all you hear is like the water splashing up and maybe the horse hooves, or sometimes it's a mule. But you just, it's very slow and peaceful. So if you ever go up to Ohio or any place that has a canal boat, I would suggest you take a ride on it just for a peaceful relaxation.
It's funny that you say it's slow, because to them this was like a big thing.
Right.
It was progress. We're going to get there faster than we would either riding a horse or walking. But for us, it's like, it's going to take a while. Okay, one last question, and this is what I ask everybody that comes on Novelists Unwind. So, and again, we'll just go around. When you're all done, you've hit the end, you're finished with a project, typed out those two magic words, what do you do to unwind? Lauralee, what do you do?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of that.
What do you do to unwind?
Oh, unwind. I am out in the mountains hiking. What can I say?
I knew you were going to say that.
That and brainstorming ideas for more books. So
absolutely.
You get away from the office and go in the woods, and boy, you get some good inspirations.
I bet you do. That's wonderful. Sherri?
Well, I don't get to unwind very much having my own virtual assistant business and things like that, but usually when I finish a book, I will try to do something fun, like go hang out with my girlfriends, go to the movie, go out to dinner, and if I can do something really big to unwind, it would be a trip to the beach. So if
I'll go with you.
Yes, so if I'm on some type of deadline, I will try to work my vacation around when I know that is going to be finished, so that it's like, woohoo, we're done, and now I'm not working on anything, which what happens the first day you get there, you start dreaming of your next story. So,
That's like Lauralee. She goes out to hiking, but these story ideas are coming at you.
So. Exactly.
Rose, I've asked you this question before. So
I do think story ideas just come all the time, and it's just whether it'll work out in a certain format for Barbara or whoever. But I do like to read too. I like to just relax and read. And that's one of the things I love to do at the beach, sit with my feet in the beach and just read a book.
Girl, tell me when you're going. I'll tag.
Let's get another book published and then go. We could all go.
That's right.
Oh my gosh. Well, this has been great. So thank you to everybody who's watching again. One more time, the Erie Canal Brides collection. Beautiful book. I mean, look at this. When you open it up, there's that pretty, very, very nice. Thank you to Lauralee, Bliss, Sherri Wilson Johnson, Rose Allen McCauley. Thank you, ladies, so much for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome.
Thanks.
This is fun. This is fun. Goodbye, everybody. Come back again for another episode of Novelists Unwind. Bye-bye.